WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Nick Austin. Today on the program, Oak Park reduced costs to get a liquor license in the city and changed the way its zoning laws are to more mixed-use allowments. Now the area is hot with new restaurants, and we'll hear about how those changes could be impacting the area later in the hour.
But first on The Metro, the weather is hot and so is glass blowing. Art drives so much of the city of Detroit, and people tend to know about the rich music that comes from our city and more noticing the murals that stretch across so many buildings around here, and even our fashion is beginning to take center stage. But something that gets less attention is glass. Before it crystallizes, glass can be shaped in many ways, and that makes it an interesting piece of art. Tomorrow through Sunday, the Michigan Glass Project is hosting an art and music festival at the Russell Industrial Center, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the event. To talk about it now, we have Drew Kupps here. He is an event coordinator, an artist, and co-founder of the Michigan Glass Project. Drew, welcome to the Metro.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah. So, Drew, where did the idea come from for this festival 10 years ago?
Well, it all started with the Colorado Project. Our friend Blade, who had hosted the event a handful of times, had invited me out to the first one, and after seeing it, I knew we had to be doing this at home. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah. And when you went to the Colorado Project, you saw what was happening there. Were you already an artist blowing?
Yes, I was a glass blower, and I participated in the event in blue glass and got the feeling of fulfillment of it being in an event like that.
Yeah, with like-minded people, other people doing the same type of thing. So, you see this Colorado Project, you see how you can fashion it here in Detroit. How is it different here in the city versus Colorado Project?
I think it's more so the same than anything else, but Detroit has really amazing industrial space that's available to us. And if it weren't for the Russell Industrial Center, I don't think we'd be able to host a show of this magnitude. They have a giant 70,000 square foot warehouse space that we host the event in. And it really allows us to build out and host hundreds of glass artists throughout the weekend who prepare pieces, as well as 60 painters, another 80 DJs, and 25 bands.
80 DJs, 25 bands. So you're the event coordinator. How are you putting all this together? How are you contacting folks? How are you, this is a lot.
Well, Allison Key is our fearless leader.
Okay.
She really puts it in place. She's the director. I'm merely the producer. I just make it happen, right? I know the people. I spend the time out there. I spread the word. I say hello. Don't
downplay it, Drew. It takes a lot of work to put together something like this.
It really does. It really does take a lot of work. But Allison really puts in the hours, and she's the organizational brain behind it, and I'm more of the glue.
Yeah. You make sure you get the stuff gets done.
It gets done, and we find the right people.
Yeah. So as you walk us through this festival, there are glass artists, musical artists, and vendors, like you said. Talk about how the festival is structured and what people can expect when they're walking through this event.
So the first thing you do is you walk into this massive space, and to the left we'll have all of our vendors. We have vendors of all kinds. Artists that have glass, photography, knitting, jewelry, silversmithing, everything you can imagine, a wide variety of talented people vending. And then you hang a right, and on your left-hand side will be 35 glass-blowing torches with some of the most magnificent artists you've ever seen in your life going off at top speed, really working together, having a great time, smiling. They get as much out of it as anybody there. I mean, they're there to give generously, and this thing is completely driven by volunteers, the generosity of our artists, and people who purchase the pieces, which are available on Sunday. So we make pieces all weekend. We pile the table high, and we have bid sheets on them. And Sunday you can finalize that last bid at 7 o'clock and take that thing home that you saw made right in front of your very eyes. And it's not only glass. We have all these artists coming out to paint and to do mosaics and all these tie-dyers, and we also have some yoga and children's activities. There's a little bit to do for everybody out there. So it's an inside festival with the glass blowing, and then as you come out to the outside yard, we have another 70,000 square feet where our food vendors are, and let me tell you, that's the best part for me.
I was going to say, tell me more about the food.
Well, we have Rev Smo, we've got pizza, we've got tacos. We have the pierogi queen coming out. Yeah, she's something else. I love that.
I love a pierogi.
And then so food on the left, and to the right will be the main stage, and then further on is the art house, and that's where all the live painting will happen. And we have everything that people have made that's up for auction on the wall. And then on the main stage, we have the motet on Saturday night. We have Honeycomb, which is a beatboxer. We have Dave McMurtry, who's a saxophonist who does dead covers. We have Pajamas and Ma Baker, who are some live jam acts from Ann Arbor that we absolutely love. And not only that, but we have DJs for days, right? Eastside John and Erno the Inferno, those guys do our lineup, and they pull all the love. Like, those guys really keep us bumping all weekend. Yeah. It's a shout out to Slow Jams on Monday night at the Woodbridge Pub, because these are the DJs who come through and play for us. And this music is the music we love and want to share and really create that Detroit feel.
Yes. Right now we're chatting with Drew Kupps, event coordinator, one of the artists as well, and a co-founder of the Michigan Glass Project. And I'm just listening to you right now talk about the event, talk about everything that's happening and the way it all has come together and the artists that are going to be represented. I think about the uniqueness that Detroit is to allow an event like this to happen and to continue to happen for 10 years now. Mm-hmm. So, it's the 10-year celebration. What does that feel like?
Well, when your favorite band goes on tour for 30 years, like the Grateful Dead, and you can go still see them, I feel like that's us. We're on our way. We're on our way to do this forever.
So we're just going to roll until the wheels roll off.
Yeah, Parliament. Bring in another band member in.
So, Drew, what makes glass blowing such a unique form of art?
Well, I think that it's ubiquitous, and it's everywhere. It's in all parts of your life. Everywhere you go, you see glass. But you don't necessarily see the process on how it's made, and a lot of people call us wizards.
If you've seen it up close, yeah.
It's alchemy, it's science, it's physics, it's creativity. It's all these things blended together in one hot moment. You really have to be with the glass and be one with it to make it do what you want, because it has its own agenda. Glass is gonna glass.
Hashtag glass is gonna glass. So, Drew, I'm just thinking about what glass blowing is, thinking about the art of it, thinking about the history of it. It's been around for a very long, it's ancient. So when we think about preserving that type of art and preserving like silversmithing and metalwork, when you're preserving those type of forms of art, what does that feel like as well? And how do you continue to preserve that?
Well, I think one philosophy of each one teach one falls into place here. For me, I'm a instructor, sometimes at the FIA, sometimes in my own personal studio, and I think it's really important to share what you know with others so that the tradition can continue. There are some art forms that have completely fallen off the face of the earth that we're not even aware of, right? And glass is just so magnificent that it deserves to live forever.
Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for, thinking about. I was just thinking to myself, like, there are so many beautiful things that human hands can do, the human mind can do, and you don't want to lose them. So when you see an event like this happening for 10 years, you see that there's longevity there.
I agree, Tia. You don't want to lose your human hands, because that would cause for a lot of issues, and you certainly won't be blowing any glass at that point.
Yeah, we're definitely having robot hands over here. But yeah, Drew, just thinking about that longevity there. So the Michigan Glass Project Festival at the Russell Industrial Center, it does start tomorrow. And what's unique about this one? Of course, it's the 10th year. So are we seeing it? I mean, it's already big because of the industrial center.
Yeah, well, we're starting to incorporate more hands-on and activation stations, and I think that's where our future is going to be, in bringing in, printing and clay making and all these other arts that aren't necessarily filling the gaps that we have at the show. And if you're an artist and you would like to participate, please contact us. You can contact us at themichiganglassproject.com and on Instagram at the Michigan Glass Project. And shoot us a line and tell us what you're thinking. If you have some great idea, we're here to hear it. And this is our people. NPR is our crowd.
I am so happy we found our people, and that's one of my favorite things. Just talking about arts, culture, and news, making sure that we're connecting all the people together in one space here in the city of Detroit. So, Drew, before I let you go, just give us the rundown. What's the time, and when should people show up tomorrow?
June 21st through the 23rd, this weekend at the Russell Industrial Center, 1600 Clay. We open at noon. We close on Saturday at midnight. And, man, get ready to sweat.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding, because it's going to be warm in there and warm outside of there. Drew Kupps is the event coordinator, one of the artists, and the co-founder of the Michigan Glass Project. They are hosting a festival at the Russell Industrial Center tomorrow through Sunday from noon to 11 p.m., actually midnight on Saturday. Drew, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and just spreading the love of glass.
Pleasure.
It is the Metro on 1019 WDET, hanging out with you, letting you know again that Russell Industrial Center event happening tomorrow through Sunday, noon to 11. You can check that out, and hopefully you are doing your best to stay cool out there. In fact, we do know about the severe thunderstorms that are causing widespread tree and power line damage that happened overnight. In fact, DTE Energy, about 39,000 customers had no electricity this morning. We will talk a little bit later with a representative from them to find out just exactly how the recovery is going and what we can expect when it comes to power. But coming up, we'll see what's going on this summer at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit. It's all about the MoCAD when we return on the Metro. It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. So many fun things happening in Detroit. I'm doing my best to stay cool, Tia. But Tia, when it comes to these events that are happening here, let me know some of the things you are looking forward to.
I am looking forward to so many things in the city of Detroit this summer. Of course, paintings and sculptures and museums are some of the things that I'm looking forward to. And when we think about museums, a lot of the time they're meant to display a variety of cultures and perspectives. But that goal is sometimes missed when it comes to artists doing the painting and the sculpting. This summer, the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit, or MoCAD, wants to change that by working with more local artists. One of the first shows this season is From Scratch, Seeding Adornment. The first solo museum presentation at MoCAD for Detroit native and College of Creative Studies graduate Lakila Brown. Brown uses the exhibit as an opportunity to celebrate Black ancestral and cultural expressions that span generations despite incredible odds. Joining us in studio live right now to discuss the exhibit is Lakila Brown. Welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me, Tia.
Yes, and I always ask before I get the show started with Detroiters, what part of Detroit are you from?
West Side.
West Side. Yeah, we kind of grew up in the same area.
I'm like, we're not about to fight, are we?
No. We grew up in the same area, so it's all cool.
Okay.
But Lakila, just spanning two gallery spaces, which is a large space, From Scratch, Seeding Adornment presents your work in two segments. This is your first showing in Detroit at MoCAD. What does it feel like to have this large showing?
Well, Tia, this is literally a dream come true, honestly. My first museum solo show, and to have it in my hometown, it's amazing. I had a moment yesterday when we were installing. I had a little moment. So it's literally a dream come true.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm showcasing my art for my town, my city, my people.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
representing us. Yes.
So what does it feel like, once again, just coming back to the city of Detroit and being able to celebrate the diversity that thrives here in the city of Detroit, in terms of the Black community especially?
Yeah. Well, my work is centered around celebrating all of our cultural contributions to ourselves, to the country at large. And that is like the base, the foundation of what I do. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of driving force behind my motivation in terms of why I choose my subjects. Yeah.
So going back to your studies at the College for Creative Studies,
yes,
and just thinking about some of the things that you were able to learn and to experience, especially going to a world-class school here in the city of Detroit, what were some of the things that you were able to take away from that?
Sure. I mean, I learned a lot of practical things in terms of, we studied everything. We had an interdisciplinary program, the fine arts program. So I studied traditional painting, sculpture, printmaking, but shout out to Cheeto Johnson, shout out to Lester Johnson in the Legacy Gallery, and Gilda Snowden, RIP. A lot of like casting, like modeling, all kinds of things that I use to this day that are, you know, the things that enabled me to make the work that is in the show today.
Yeah. Yeah. So your work, like I said, celebrates that diversity. It celebrates the thriving force in the Black community. But you also talk about the idea that, you know, there is diversity within the Black community. It's not a monolith.
Absolutely.
There's not. So how do you display that with your art?
Well, so my work is largely based in the genre of still life, which is kind of interesting in terms of sculpture. So there's two parts to our show, the show that we're putting together. There's the ethnobotany work, which uses plants in terms of culinary plants. So you'll see like collard greens and corn, which is something that, like, I don't know about you, but when I eat collard greens, I eat it with cornbread.
Yeah.
So I use those plants in their whole form in the ethnobotany section, along with like meat scraps like chicken wings and pig feet and things like that. And then there's the other part of the show, which is the adornment work, which, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s listening to hip hop. And so you'll see like door knocker earrings and rope chains, things like that. So those are kind of the two components of the show. And I think that people throughout the diaspora can, you know, celebrate those kinds of things, think about like these kinds of ways that plants and adornment have become important to like building cultural identity. I think we all have that in common, and it's like a place that we can all meet, because people can think about like, you know, if there's older people, they talk about like things that they wore and ways that they cooked cornbread and ways that, you know, people can argue of those kinds of things.
Yeah, sugar and grits or salt and grits.
Woo! About to come to blows about that. I'm like, it's okay.
It's all right. You can eat it whatever way you like to eat it. Right now, we're talking to Lakeela Brown. She's a native Detroiter and one of the exhibiting artists at MoCAD this summer. And as well, you know, there's a theme right now that I've been hearing from a lot of millennial artists: generational knowledge, legacy. You talk about it a lot. You just talked about it a little bit as well. What does it mean to you to continue on a legacy, but also trying to bring it to a new generation?
Yeah, well, I am paying tribute to, you know, our ancestors. We, you know, there was this idea that we didn't have culture. And part of what I'm trying to do is address the art canon and like correctively install some of our objects, go back and install some of our objects within the still life genre. Because, you know, we're part of the Western canon as well now too, and so that's part of like how I pay tribute to my grandmother, who formed, you know, was a part of forming my taste in food. So, and then, you know, I'm an elder millennial, and you know, I want to also learn and grow, and so I'm listening to younger artists and younger people in general, as I also listen to older artists and older generations, artists and non-artists, and sort of can bring all of that into my work and try to, you know, have that flexibility and learn what, you know, you can learn from everybody. You can learn from the older people, you can learn from the younger people. And so, you know, I'm trying to like sort of bring those two, you know, together.
So I'm thinking about I'm looking at a history timeline in my brain right now, just like you were talking about it just a little bit, in American history, and how there are just, you know, there are gaps there. There are things that are missing.
Yes.
And you want to use the exhibit to kind of put those items into space, into place. So just talk a little bit more about that if you can, and the importance of that.
Absolutely. Well, something that has been important to me, and I didn't realize that it would like make a connection with other people somehow, but you know, I grew up, like I was saying, I grew up eating collard greens. I didn't know that other people ate collard greens. I just thought that was like a house culture thing. Then it was like, oh, okay, like growing up in Detroit, and it's like my little friends are like, yeah, we eat that too. We eat it like this. And then like understanding that it was like we were a part of a larger culture. But then also my family, I'm like the oddball that went to art school, but like when my family, I kind of take pride in the fact that when my family who did not go to art school, and they care about me, but they may not know that much about art. They're intelligent people, but like, unless you're really, really in the art world, it's like, what is some of this weird stuff? But one thing that I take pride in is that, like, if my grandmother sees my work, she can see some objects that she actually relates to. She knows, she may not know anything about the history of like Western sculpture, but she knows what collard greens are because she's been cooking them, all my life and most of hers. And then like people like my cousins, they can see door knocker earrings, and like that's an object that they can relate to. They may, they may or may not care about art, but they can see themselves reflected in like those objects.
Yeah. Representation. And especially this is building on that. We talked a little bit earlier about, just pulling from and being in this space right now where you're pulling from younger generations, you're pulling from older generations, you're kind of in the middle right now, just smack dab in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there any tension there? What are some of the things that you're feeling when you're in that space?
Sure. There's lots of tension there. I mean, art as a industry has not been known to be very inclusive. And so there is some tension there. And I don't want to flatter myself, but I am trying to like bridge that gap by using objects that like people from my community can relate to. And then also bringing, like I said, potentially some new objects or some more objects, not new objects, but widening the vocabulary of the still life genre. So also speaking back to the canon and hopefully expanding what objects can be considered to be still life.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that MoCAD has really been pushing for and talking about, just making sure that they have a wide array and wide variety of artists being represented. And I just think about some of the names that have come. Just last year we had Sydney, I can't even get her.
Sydney James. Yes. Sydney G. James. Shout out to Sydney.
Yes, Sydney.
Yeah, Sydney and I had a little overlap when I was a freshman. Sydney was a senior in the illustration program, and she does a lot of, she's a person who is really bringing the culture to the community throughout the city and throughout the world, really. So I want to shout out her and, Sabrina Nelson and Mario Moore, who are all like artists, and Tiff Massey, I should say, at the DIA, all bringing culture to, like, we're working really hard to try to bridge that gap. We want our community in there and to enjoy. I would also like to acknowledge my curator, Jovelyn, who has brought me this amazing opportunity. But yeah, we're trying to do that work. It is not easy in the art world because like I said, it's not an industry known for being very inclusive. So, maybe I'm being grandiose, but I hope that, it'll bring more people in and people will feel welcome and feel seen with these through the depiction and use of these objects as a subject.
Yeah, and just the names that you just threw out there, I'm just seeing like the Mount Rushmore of like,
yeah, my Mount Rushmore for sure. Yes, Detroit's Mount Rushmore. Yeah, absolutely. Like Jessica Carmore, who went to we went to Cody. We were both Cody Comets. Shout out poet laureate, Detroit poet laureate, Jessica Carmore.
See, and that's what I love about the Detroit arts community. It's like it breathes, it thrives, it moves itself, but it also is making sure that the culture is breathing and thriving with it as well. So it's just like this beautiful thing that's been happening. So before I do let you go, would love to talk about the exhibit one more time so people remember, like, hey, they are talking about a showing that's happening at MoCAD.
Absolutely. Please come and say hi to us. Seating from scratch, seating adornment opens at MoCAD, the Museum of Contemporary Art, next Friday, June 28th. We will be there from 5 to 10. There is a talk happening that starts at 6, but the museum will be open. Admission is free. Please come and say hello. Don't be shy. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Lakila Brown is a native Detroiter artist and sculptor. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Oh my God, thank you for having me.
As well, MoCAD is closed through the 27th. They will be opening up June 28th for this showing as the beginning of the summer lineup. It's from 5 to 10 p.m. The artist talk begins at 6 p.m.
Yes.
And that is at MoCAD in downtown Detroit on Woodward Avenue. So once again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love us.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. You know, the temperatures are rising. That's not the only thing that can be high around these parts, especially for you entrepreneurs out there. The cost of a liquor license in Oakland County can climb as high as $100,000, and some suburban communities don't allow them at all. That was the case in Oak Park until about a decade ago, and now the suburban community is seeing big returns. WDET's Ryan Patrick Hooper spoke with Detroit News restaurant reporter and critic Melody Baitens about what's changed in Oak Park and a few of the new places you might want to check out.
About 10 years ago, Oak Park started to allow liquor licenses for the restaurants that kind of were already existing there. It started with like beer and wine for the restaurants, and then it became allowable for restaurants to have a full liquor license with cocktails and all of this. And there's a couple different things going on. So Oak Park residents and city leaders had come back to this kind of question a couple times over the last, I would say, several decades. But in 2015, they passed the law. And, you know, things don't happen overnight. They happen slowly. So, you know, some places that were already existing started selling alcohol, but not many. You saw a lot of, you know, most of the businesses in Oak Park were like, think of like Ernie's Market and Thai-Fi and, you know, these kind of little strip mall places. I think there's an Aldi there. There's a really good Mexican Salvadorian restaurant, things like that. But then we saw, you know, a brewery open up and another brewery, Oak Parker, opened in November. And I think that was really kind of the turning point where people, you know, it's on the corner of Berkeley, but it's definitely an Oak Park restaurant.
It's becoming a popular destination for people that live in the city, obviously, but people are also traveling to Oak Park to check out some of these new places. On the other side, the side of doing business, it's really affordable to be able to get a liquor license in Oak Park as well. What are they doing differently from other communities in Oakland County?
To say really affordable is a total understatement because it's like in some ways free. You have to pay licensing, you have application fees, you have to pay your lawyer, you have to pay a bunch of filing fees. But consider, like, comparing it to opening a restaurant in Ferndale or Royal Oak, Oakland County, you know, business owners could sell their liquor license for, you know, $100,000, $80,000. But in Oak Park, they're new licenses. They're not being transferred. They're not in escrow. They're not being sold from one owner to another. These are new. So while they're affordable, you also have to be approved by, and this goes in every community, but especially in Oak Park, you know, you have to be approved by the city council. The neighborhood has to agree to it. There's time and place for people to speak out if they're not into it. So it's, you know, yes, it's affordable. It's a great place for like a you know, upstarting business or a business owner that has never, you know, had a business before. But at the same time, it has to be something that the community really wants and is really ready to have and approves it.
And so far, no growing pains. So the folks in Oak Park are saying, this has been great for our community. We're kind of excited to see what comes of this because a lot of this is still very, very new.
It is. And I heard after my article last week published, I did hear a lot from community members that were just so happy that there was something, you know, something growing. Even people, you know, if you don't drink, it just would be nice to be able to ride your bike up somewhere and sit on the patio and have a lemonade or some food or, you know, just have more places that are destinations. One of the owners of Oak Parker told me that when he opened, people were so excited they were coming in and saying, oh, I live on this street. And he doesn't live in Oak Park, so he's not really sure what street they were talking about, but now he does know, and people, you know, they have a sense of ownership. Like, oh, I'm over here. Like, I belong. This is my neighborhood. You're here joining us. Like, welcome. There's definitely a sense of, like, we have this cool thing, or we have this growing little area. I think people are excited.
That was WDET's Ryan Patrick Hooper speaking with Detroit News restaurant reporter and critic Melody Baitens about the changes in Oak Park's restaurant scene and a few of the new places you can check out. This is the Metro.
This is the Metro, and coming up, we'll talk about what it will mean if a federal agency were to declare extreme heat a disaster. That's coming up next. This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM, and today a heat advisory continues. A high will be 87, and there's 100% chance of rain, Nick.
100. That means it's going to happen. No matter what you do, take it to the bank. Go to Vegas right now if you have to. It will be raining. But you're right, Tia. We've been dealing with a lot of heat this week. And yesterday, Southeast Michigan was met with another unique weather event. A severe storm that hit last night downed both trees and power lines. As of 10:30 this morning, DTE reported that more than 40,000 people were without power, with most of those customers being Oakland County residents. To talk about the storm and what DTE is doing to restore power to the customers in Southeast Michigan, we're joined by Brian Calka. He is the Vice President of Distribution Operations for DTE Energy. Brian, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Let's jump into the extent of the damage from last night, because I guess that's what we're associating this power outage with. Can you tell us what it looks like in terms of trees and power lines that have been down? Let's get an idea of what we're looking at in terms of the damage that's causing these issues.
Yeah, that's a great question. So last night, as we all know, we had some pop-up storms roll through our service territory. And the damage they inflicted wasn't necessarily widespread, but the areas that it did hit, there is a lot of damage, and a couple of areas in particular. So in the Southfield, Royal Oak, Beverly Hills area, and then up in Mount Clemens, those are two areas that really saw the brunt of the wind. I mean, we saw wind speeds north of 50 miles an hour, and that will obviously inflict a little bit of damage out there. But we've got an army of crews out there working today. They worked through the night last night to restore about a third of the customers that were originally impacted, and we'll make a big dent in the number today with the rest of these customers being restored as soon as possible, but probably tomorrow sometime.
Right, and we know you're working to get it done as quickly as possible, but for folks who are trying to schedule, trying to figure out what they need to do, especially looking for other places to be cool, want to know when to get back home, when to be in the area, what are we looking like in terms of estimated time to get these folks back online in Macomb and the Oakland counties?
We are fully expecting that by the end of the day today, somewhere in the 80 to 90% of the customers that were originally impacted by the weather last night, they will have power. The remaining 10% will be restored sometime tomorrow. If you go to the outage app on the DTE website, or if you have the app itself, there are estimates on the jobs, and you can use those as a general guideline as to when your power will be restored.
It seems like Oakland County, as you mentioned, was hit particularly hard. Do we know why that was the case in this event?
It's just where these storms popped up. With this continued 90-degree heat that we've been seeing here in Metro Detroit since Monday, a lot of energy in the atmosphere. And it is a bit randomized as to where these storms pop up. Unfortunately, for those residents in the Oakland County area, they did pop up and roll through there, and that's where some of the strongest winds were seen. Other areas in our service territory were, quite frankly, untouched. But unfortunately, the Oakland County area did take a pretty good hit last night.
We're speaking with Brian Calka, who's the Vice President of Distribution Operations for DTE Energy. You mentioned you're hoping to get 90% up by the end of the day today. I know that's an estimate, but for the folks who are dealing with heat, especially because we know that can have some detrimental impact on people's healths, what recommendations do you guys have in terms of folks who need to figure out how to stay cool if they don't have power right now?
Yeah, if they don't have power, obviously, if they have family members or friends that do have power, I think this is when we as human beings can all rally to the cause and help each other out. So I think that would be a great recommendation. Staying hydrated as much as possible is obviously critical. But one thing I would want to highlight here is, to the extent you have a generator that you want to utilize during a power outage, please do not set it up inside Make sure this generator is set up outside the home, and make sure it's away from any windows or doors, because those fumes can cause problems. So it's really important that people set these generators up and place them in the proper location.
You know, you mentioned that Oakland County was just hit particularly hard because that's where things happen to pop up. And I think a lot of us are seeing, with climate change happening, worsening weather events, it's becoming a little bit more common that you get these high-speed winds, you get trees coming down. I've seen video, I'm sure you have too, of trees that are down that seem to be leading to some of these outages, which means it's something we're dealing with right now. For you guys there at DTE, is there any plan in place to maybe have a more resilient grid or more resilient infrastructure that can hold up to these things? Because it doesn't seem like they're going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. And to your point, climate change, I'm a firm believer that it's here. It's definitely showing itself with respect to severe weather, not only in the summertime with stronger winds and storms, but we're also seeing it in the wintertime as well. And, as a company, we recognize this, and we are laser focused on making sure our customers have a great experience with DTE as it relates to outages and the like. And we have developed a renewed strategy. It's a 4-point plan to do exactly what you're talking about. It's to harden the grid, make it more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And this ranges from putting automation where you can, through pressing of buttons downtown, you can control and reroute power onto the grid. Some areas we're completely rebuilding the grid. We're accelerating pole replacements and the hardware replacements throughout our system. And, of course, really foundational to reliability to our customers is tree trimming. And we embarked on a new tree trimming strategy 4 to 5 years ago, and we're about 85% of the way through it. And we will continue to be, obviously working with our customers, but to do what's right in terms of removing trees from power lines and developing the proper clearances to avoid tree-related outages.
Brian Calka, Director of Distribution Operations for DTE Energy, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
This is the Metro 1019 WDET FM. You just heard from Nick Austin talking about the power outages that people are experiencing right now throughout the Metro Detroit area as well. Millions of people are enduring a heat wave. Some scientists want the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, to treat extreme heat as a major disaster, which would allow cities to access federal support. NPR's Alejandra Barunda spoke with Layla Fidel about why FEMA doesn't consider extreme heat a disaster.
To get FEMA's help, a state needs to ask for a presidentially declared disaster, and not all disasters qualify. There's a law called the Stafford Act that authorizes FEMA's activities, and it has an example list. Earthquakes and hurricanes are on it. Heat is not. But it's also not explicitly excluded. The act is actually written very flexibly, so COVID-19 counted, for example, even though pandemic wasn't on the list. So theoretically, extreme heat could also be considered. But it's just never happened.
And why hasn't it ever happened?
Well, so only a few states have ever asked for that disaster declaration for heat. Illinois did, for example, after the 1995 heat wave that killed hundreds of people in Chicago. But so far, states have all been told no. That's because FEMA thought the destruction wasn't so overwhelming that the states couldn't handle it themselves. Juanita Constable puts it this way. She's an environmental policy expert at the Natural Resources Defense Council.
After a hurricane, after a big storm, there's devastation galore. There's power lines down and buildings destroyed and entire businesses just blown away.
With heat, on the other hand,
most of the people that are hurt are essentially invisible to decision makers. They die alone in their homes. They are unhoused and start dying on the street.
We actually know that heat is killing many more people than disasters like hurricanes. It just hasn't inspired the same urgent response.
I mean, that's so sad. They're just forgotten, it sounds like, from what she was saying. What is this coalition asking FEMA to do?
They want FEMA to include extreme heat and wildfire smoke in the Stafford Act. That would help the agency use its considerable powers and money with these disasters. FEMA has actually indicated that they're interested in responding to heat, and they don't even technically need to update the language. Under the right circumstances, a state asks for help, the president declares an emergency, FEMA sees a big enough need. They could actually step in now.
And what support could FEMA provide in an extreme heat disaster?
Well, FEMA could set up cooling centers or water stations or send in extra medical personnel. They also fund long-term resilience and recovery efforts. That could mean setting up permanent resilience hubs or developing other infrastructure to make cities cooler. FEMA also directs money toward people hurt by disasters. Here's a big issue Nurse Adelita Cantu from San Antonio sees all the time for her lower-income patients.
They're not turning on their air conditioning because they're afraid of the electricity bill.
That decision to not turn on the AC can be deadly. So some suggest FEMA could maybe pay people's electricity bills after a heat disaster.
And what has FEMA said about the role it could play when it comes to extreme heat?
FEMA administrators have said recently that they know they have a role in extreme heat response, and they're open to the idea. But it's really new ground for them, so everyone is figuring it out on the fly.
NPR's Alejandra Barunda spoke with Leila Fado about why extreme heat is not considered a disaster by FEMA.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. And coming up, we'll talk with owners of a new coffee shop, speaking of hot, that opened up in Detroit's North End. Well, you can get iced coffee, but I've never done it. That's so European to you.
I'm not a fan either.
But
No. We don't want to get attacked, though, because I know there are iced coffee drinkers out there.
Oh, yeah. No, I love them, too.
I love you guys.
And we'll talk about it all when we come back on the Metro.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. And Nick, it feels like a Monday, but it's a Thursday.
It is a Thursday. Trying to stay awake. I got my coffee right now in a Made in Detroit WDET mug. You know, when I drink coffee, and I drink a lot of it, I don't drink it for the taste. I drink it for the use. We need to stay locked in. We need to stay bringing the listener high quality content. So I don't even understand why I am enjoying this magnetic beverage, but I know a lot of people out there do. A lot of coffee shops popping up. One that people are really happy about just opened up in the North End. But there's an interesting story behind this because previously, two other coffee shops that occupied the same space, Black Coffee, which opened in late 2022, and Kenilworth Cafe a year before it, they didn't make it. So, could a third time be a charm? And what is it about coffee in the North End that has people so excited about this venture? To find out, we're joined by the co-owners of Cafe Noir, the new shop over there, Evan, Faye, and Asher Van Sickle. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so Evan, what inspired you guys to open a French-inspired cafe in the North End?
So actually, the building... I actually purchased the building, and there was a really cool opportunity to take the coffee shop. I live in the neighborhood, and the previous two cafes weren't really consistent, weren't open as much as they should be. So it was a good opportunity to kind of bring on a new partner and really kind of revolutionize the ways that we were going to do coffee and be consistent and offer a superior product that we were consistent.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So now we know why you think this one's going to work, because people, when they want their coffee, they want it to be available to them. What is it about coffee, though, Asher, that you think brings this all in here? Like, why am I drinking it right now?
Yeah, I think you hit on it just a little bit when you mentioned, I don't drink it for the taste as much as I do just that energy, that feeling. In my mind, that's kind of all encompassing. It's a little bit of all of it. You have that taste, you have the actual like science of the caffeine behind it. You have that feeling when you have something warm or something cold, going down into your gut. It's a whole thing. And then, coffee itself just brings people together and fosters community and fosters conversation. So, when you say coffee or let's get a cup of coffee, you're saying so much. It's like a picture is worth 1,000 words. So is a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and it does have that meaning to it. And Evan, then for you, why would community at a coffee shop as opposed to something like a restaurant or, library? There's other places you could meet people. Is there anything to you that you think's unique about like a cafe getting a cup?
Of course. So yeah, I think a cafe is really inviting space, right? So in a restaurant, you kind of are expected to order food and leave fairly quickly. It's not really a space where you can sit, decompress, and get your work done or have a meeting in a kind of a low threat space. So we want the cafe to be a community center, a community hub where we have fantastic food, fantastic drinks, and we can come together as a community and not have that pressure.
Yeah. We're speaking with Evan Fay and Asher Van Sickle, co-owners of Cafe Noir on Detroit's North End. Just opened up this summer. Again, they say they got longer hours for you to enjoy. But I need to check in with you on this, Evan, because, you weren't originally from the area. You spent a lot of time in Alaska before coming here, but 12 years later, you set down roots here. Why Detroit for you, Evan?
So honestly, I looked all over the country I was in the military. Wanted to retire in a place where I could bring my family and really kind of get involved in the community. And we looked all over the country, and Detroit kept coming to the top of the list. We loved everything about its cultural diversity, its up and coming real estate scene, all the way you didn't have all the major sports teams. In the military, I lived in places like Wyoming and Alaska that didn't have that sense of community. Or have things to rally around, and Detroit checked every single box.
Oh, yeah, we'll give you lots of things to rally around. And Asher, I know you like to travel, experience coffee in different locations. What do you think is unique about what you guys are trying to do at Cafe Noir that's different, or what do you think sets apart different of coffee locations that you've had and experienced?
Yeah, for sure. Like you mentioned, we're located there in the North End. It's a very diverse, very unique neighborhood that is, has a strong identity and is continually evolving and creating a new one. And so as a cafe, and there at Cafe Noir, we are doing the same thing. We put a mural on the side of the building of Josephine Baker, and we have a quote on that mural that says, "To realize your dreams, we must first wake up." So with Cafe Noir, just like in North End at large, that is what we are doing. We are trying to realize a dream within this cafe, but then come alongside and doing it and building it together at the same time with North End and with the city of Detroit. And so just like every other coffee shop, we aspire to have great coffee and great pastries and great community, but really Detroit hustles harder, and that's what we're doing with Detroit.
Yeah, coffee will definitely wake you up. One of the reasons I'm drinking it right now, Asher, I hear you there. But gentlemen, I also, before we get out of here, I do want to touch on the fact that I know there were a couple break-ins that happened there recently, congregation, and then you guys experienced one also. I just want to give you an opportunity, after it, upon reflection, has there been any fallout, Evan, or what's the experience taught you, and how are you guys doing?
So, honestly, I think things like that happen kind of teach us how to become more resilient, right? Yeah. So we updated our security. It was the hardest part of the break-in was that there was a younger person, a 13-year-old involved, and that was really kind of hit home and wanting to make sure that there were opportunities because Father's Day just came up. I have 3 little kids. We got to make sure that we're pouring into our youth and not teaching them the negative things. But as a cafe, the community really came out and supported. It was actual, the news came out. The owner of the congregation reached out. We had great conversations with them. And really, it showed how strong the community is. And one of the things that we love about being in Detroit is that we come together in times when we need to come together. So that was really kind of on display. And we were, ultimately, even though it was a negative thing, it taught us some stuff and gave us a rallying point.
All right. Well, very good, guys. I'm so happy that we had a chance to talk to both of you. And as I mentioned, your Instagram, you can find them more information at cafenoir.det. Evan Fay and Asher Van Sickle, thank you both for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
That's the Metro. For Thursday, June 20th, you can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Our assistant producers are Sydney Walkley and Anel Scott.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
You're listening to WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.